Hi, and welcome wherever you happen to be to Unstoppable Mindset, where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet. Unexpected is always fun, and it's what we mostly do on Unstoppable Mindset. But I'm really glad you're here, and I want to welcome our guest today, Chris Blum, who is the executive director of the Heartland Cancer Foundation. He's going to tell us about that and a lot of other stuff. And I know, Chris, you've had a long stint in doing things in the Boy Scouts and having been in scouting and risen to the rank of Eagle with Vigil in the Order of the Arrow. I'm very familiar with scouting as well. So we've got lots to talk about. And I want to welcome you and to Unstoppable Mindset. And again, thank you for being here.
Yeah, Michael, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
This is Chris's first podcast, so we'll try to be nice. But thanks for doing this. Why don't we start by maybe talking about the early Chris growing up and all that, and kind of what uh, what what drove you, what you learned, and anything else that you want to tell us about the earlier Chris.
Sure. Well, uh,
Hey, I'm a Midwest boy. I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, Council Bluffs, Iowa. If you know anything about Omaha, Nebraska, you're familiar with the College World Series.
Yep.
Um, so, uh, yeah, I was, uh, yeah, grew up average middle class family. Have two parents, one sister, two dogs. You know, lived in Omaha for 7 years, and then both my parents were working in Council Bluffs, Iowa, so we moved across the river and actually moved to the country because living on a gravel road went from city streets with sidewalks and a park right across the street to a gravel road with 8 houses on it, and um, ended up going to high school at Council Bluffs Lewis Central. Played golf and ran cross country, was very active in our East Side Christian Church, and then I went to Northwest Missouri State University in Maryville, Missouri. Uh, thought I wanted a career in broadcasting, so I did some work on the radio station and the TV station there in at school. Uh, Thought maybe I wanted to go into sports management, so my first job out of college was with a summer collegiate baseball team in St. Joseph, Missouri, the St. Joseph Cardinals. Uh, Had a lot of fun working in a minor league baseball setting, but couldn't make any money, and didn't like spending my whole summer at the ballpark because I didn't get a chance to play golf or do a lot of other things. And then an opportunity presented itself to go to work for the Boy Scouts of America in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And having grown up in scouting, I thought, hey, this might be something that I'd be good at. And that career lasted 25 years, took me to from South Dakota to Minnesota, Michigan, Ohio, Texas, and then back here to Lincoln, Nebraska. My wife's Nebraska native from Wahoo, and I'm from, as I mentioned earlier, Omaha. So we're like, hey, this is a great opportunity to come back home. All of our family is between Council Bluffs, Wahoo, and Lincoln. So uh, we've got 15 nieces and nephews. I think we got 15. I might be off on the count, but thought it'd be a good opportunity to put down some roots and stop moving all over the country, and then that has led me to the Heartland Cancer Foundation.
So when did you leave the Scouts from a professional standpoint?
Left the Scouts in 2019, February 2019, and then had a spent a couple years at the Nebraska Safety Council here in Lincoln, doing some business development and some marketing, helping them as a nonprofit work to keep the workers safe through OSHA trainings.
Mm-hmm.
We also had some driver ed programs for teaching teenagers how to drive safely and effectively. And then we also had a wellness component to make sure that the the employees of our companies, whether they be manufacturing or in the desk, the office employees, making sure that they're taking care of themselves physically and mentally. Um, Little things like drinking enough water, getting up and stretching every few hours, having a stand-up desk so that you don't spend 8 hours a day sitting.
Yeah.
And yeah, and had 2 years there, and then an opportunity presented itself to come work for the Heartland Cancer Foundation. And so in August of 2022, I came on board with the Heartland Cancer Foundation.
So, being with the Scouts for 25 years, what prompted you to leave and go elsewhere?
Uh, the biggest uh, the biggest thing was that they were asking me to move again.
Oh,
I had
they're no fun.
yeah set up roots here in Lincoln. Uh, Early on in my career, when you're single, it's easy to get
Yeah.
up and move every 3 or 4 years. Even when you're newly married and you and your spouse don't have kids, it's hey, it's kind of fun, a new adventure. But then when you realize your spouse has to give up her career and start all over, and you realize that the raise that you got gets wiped out because your household income gets cut in half. And then you got to start all over with finding a gym to go to, finding the grocery store, meeting the neighbors, finding the new house that you just moved into. Where's the water shut off? Where's all the stuff I was used to?
Yeah.
And so we had made the decision when we had moved to Lincoln, was that if we decided that the Boy Scouts wasn't going to work out for us, could we stay in Lincoln? And again, we were around family. Uh, we had started to put down roots. My son had just started, was into school, and like, look, I'm not uprooting all of this, and uh, decided, there's an opportunity to do other things that I can do and be very successful um, professionally and personally, and um, chose to chose to leave the Boy Scouts.
Do you still have family in Omaha?
Yes, yep. My
And that's
my
not very
mom and
far
sister.
away.
Nope, my mom and sister live actually in Council Bluffs. I've got an aunt that lives in Bellevue, which is a suburb of Omaha, and then my wife's got brothers and sisters, and I'll miss that count up. She's got 7 brothers and sisters in Wahoo and Lincoln. So uh, we're all right here. So
Yeah, it is tough to move. And I know my wife passed away in November of 2022, and people started asking me after she passed, well, are you going to move because you've got that big house? And as I love to say to people, first of all, moving is incredibly stressful, especially when you've been somewhere for a while. But for me, um, I pay under 200. I pay under $2,000 a month for principal, interest, tax, and insurance. Why would I move? It'd be costing me a bunch more money to move anywhere. So,
sure.
uh, and the house is 7 years old, so it's built to all the codes and solar and all that. So there's a lot to be said for being content with where you are. So I'm with you. I I know that I've spent time in Lincoln and worked with the Department of Rehabilitation back there, and then across the state somewhat. I have a former geometry teacher, Dick Herbolsheimer, who was my sophomore geometry teacher. He now lives in Sydney, Nebraska. He kind of
Sure.
always wanted to move back there, even though he was teaching out in Palmdale. But we visited him. He is what 87 this year, um, and we always discuss the fact that he's older than I am, and he keeps telling me I'm catching up. And I said, nope, you're always going to be 7 years ahead of me. I'm not going to worry about it. Or not 7 years. You're going to be 14 years ahead of me, and I'm not catching up.
Sure.
That's
Sure.
kind of fun. but I like Nebraska. It's a lot of fun to be there and so on. Well, you and it's interesting to hear what you say about the Safety Council. I haven't spoken at any state safety council meetings, but I've spoken at safety and emergency preparedness organization conventions and had a lot of fun doing it, and really appreciate some of the kinds of things that you're talking about and what you're trying to teach people to do. Because yeah, if you just sit all day every day and in an office at a desk, that's not good for anybody.
Correct.
Well, so you went to the Nebraska, well, to the Heartland Cancer Foundation. Tell me about the foundation, if you would.
Sure. So the Heartland Cancer Foundation was founded in 2008 by a local group of cancer doctors who, as they were helping their patients and treating their patients, they saw a need to um, help them with their basic expenses, their car payments, their mortgage, their utilities, and then the travel expenses to and from treatment. Those are expenses that when you get a cancer diagnosis, they don't they don't stop. Uh, you know, um, they wanted to do something uh, locally for the local patients. Raising money for the national organizations for research is important, but when you're going through treatment and struggling to figure out how to pay your bills, you don't really care about uh, cancer research and funding that leaves the state. So these doctors put together this foundation, and uh, over the past few years, they've just steadily grown it through some special events. We currently provide grants of $750 to cancer patients in Nebraska. You've got to be a resident of Nebraska. You have to be in active treatment, and you have to qualify financially. What we Our requirements are we take the federal poverty guidelines and we times that by four,
Mm.
and the application process is pretty easy. It's online, or we can actually mail a paper copy to a person, working with their nurse practitioner or their social worker, the medical staff that they work with. Um, they get it filled out. Our turnaround time is about a about a day or two, depending on um, how quick our program director reads it, and then we approve the grant. The nice thing that I think we offer is we actually um, pay the bills directly to the mortgage company or the car company or the utility company for the patient. So that takes that burden off of them or their family, who's ever might be helping them out throughout
Mhm.
the whole process. If the patient says, "Hey, I my biggest need of those four categories is travel expenses to and from treatment," um, then we'll mail them gas cards to that they can use for their trips. Nebraska being mostly rural, a lot of our folks are driving outside of Lincoln, 45 minutes an hour into Lincoln for treatment, or if they're in one of our outstanding community towns that we serve, whether it be Beatrice or Grand Island or Hastings, they could be driving 15, 20 minutes. And the gas prices the last few years have kind of skyrocketed.
Yeah.
So that's been our biggest need in the past couple of years, to ensure that folks have the travel expenses. And again, we pride ourselves on immediate and practical financial assistance for local cancer patients. So like I said, as long as you live in Nebraska, and you're in active treatment, you're eligible. And we've been blessed that we've never turned down a request. So um, we're that's something we're planning on continuing to a streak we hope we plan on continuing.
Are the grants one-time grants, or can people receive more than one, or how does that work?
They can receive one every 12 months.
Ah, okay.
So yeah, unfortunately, cancer doesn't usually get fixed in a year.
No.
So we offer after that 12-month cycle, they can reapply. We also collaborate with other foundations here in Nebraska, the Hope Foundation, the Grace Foundation, um, and Angels Among Us is another one where our patients can help. If they get grants from them, uh, we actually encourage that. We don't disqualify them because they get grants from somebody else. So,
Right.
um, we and we share those resources with our on our website. Hey, here's some other areas of needs, because as great as the needs are for cancer patients, our mission that we've stuck to is these are our four categories that we fund, and we'll give you money for these four. If you need help outside of those four categories, here are some people that you should reach out to.
Are there similar organizations in other states?
That is a very good question. I want to say yes, but I don't know that for sure. I have to believe that there are. That's probably something I need to be more aware of. But like I said, most of the stuff we have done has been all in Nebraska. So uh, we are very familiar with the foundations in Nebraska that help. Um, Again, the great thing about Google is I could probably Google it here if I
Yeah,
was more talented to be able to do this while I'm talking to you. But I don't want to mess that up and hit the wrong button and get cut off from the podcast here.
I
So
know. I know what you're
um,
saying.
we can probably Google and like I said, I'm sure there are groups uh, in other states.
Well, and there are a lot of different organizations in Nebraska, as you say. What sets the HCF apart? What makes you unique in what you do?
What makes us unique is that we provide the immediate practical assistance, and it's a quick turnaround time. You're not applying and then waiting. Uh, you know, you apply and say, hey, I need my mortgage paid for. Um, we agree. We start covering that mortgage payment. Um, and most of our clients at mortgage payments somewhere between 1 and 3 months. And so if we can take that burden off of an individual for that amount of time, and they can spend that that 1 to 3 months just focusing on healing and not having to worry about how am I going to pay the mortgage this month. Um, we have a local board of 12 members. So all our decisions are made here in Lincoln. We're not having to call somebody in Dallas. We're not having to call somebody in New York. Um, you know, if we have something we need to do, we talk to the board and we make a decision. Uh, most of our Majority of our funding is all raised here in Nebraska, um, and we do get several thousands of dollars of support from the pharmaceutical companies through some educational programs that we run. And why those dollars aren't headquartered here in Nebraska, they all have local representatives that live and work here in Omaha or Lincoln, and that um, we're based local. We serve local, and uh, our staff all lives here. In fact, our one staff member who works part time for us, she worked at the Beatrice Hospital for a time in the intake office, so she was involved with the patients on a daily basis before she came to work for us. So, yeah, I think that's what makes us unique. And again, we were started by local doctors helping local patients. Several of those doctors are still involved. Several of their spouses are still involved in our Impact Guild. Um, so I think that's a long-winded answer to your short question, Michael. Sorry about that.
That's fair. So I'm curious. You said something that at least prompts a question. So you get funding from some outside sources like pharmaceutical companies and so on. Do they ever try to restrict their funds, or is that part of the message that you send is you can't do that?
Yeah, that's part of our message. Is that they can't really restrict the funds, and if they ask to restrict the funds, we we just say that we can't accept them.
Mm-hmm.
So again, the four things that we support are, I guess, mortgage payment, car payment, utilities, um, and then travel expenses. So
Travel.
uh, that's what we ask them to support. And
It's great
yeah,
that you,
most of the companies, again, because I'm dealing with local reps, they understand what we're doing,
yeah.
and then we can just work through there.
Well, you've spent pretty much all of your professional life in the nonprofit world, which generally speaking, certainly from a financial standpoint, doesn't pay as much as working a lot of times in the corporate world. But you've been very successful at being a leader and building teams and so on. What makes you stay in the nonprofit sector as opposed to going elsewhere?
Oh, good question. I think part of it is in my Gallup strengths. You know, I've realized I'm a very mission driven uh, individual. A lot of times working in the Boy Scouts, it gave me the ability to act and operate like an entrepreneur without the risk. I didn't have, there was always an umbrella there. And so I like the flexibility. I like being able to help folks. Uh, I've never really been a 9 to 5er, so
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of times I'm meetings and activities outside of the workday. It's it's more of a calling, and being able to help folks is and give back. I think that's why I spent a lot of time with the Boy Scouts, is I knew what it did for me as a kid, and I thought if I could, this is my way to help give back. I wasn't the best camper, the best knot tire. I like camping, but I prefer a Marriott.
Yeah.
And so I figured if I could help, raise the money and handle stuff on the back end of things, that would be something that would be my way of paying it back or paying it forward.
I hear you. I didn't mind going camping. I enjoyed it, but at the same time, it was always a whole lot more fun to stay indoors, as I learned a whole lot later in life. So um, there's a lot to be said for hotels, but at the same time, I never regret the knowledge and all the information that I learned in my years as a scout, including camping and learning how to function in those kinds of environments, whether I choose to do it or not. Having the knowledge is also a very helpful thing to be able to tie yourself to.
Yes.
And so um, I don't mind it a bit. What caused you to start being a professional scouter? Um, what was it just a job that came up, or how did that work out?
Oh, so yeah, that's an interesting story.
Love
I
stories.
when I left, so I was working in minor league baseball, as I mentioned earlier, and the season was over. September, I was actually working with the Wichita Wranglers, a double A team in Wichita, Kansas. Um, Season was over early September, and they said, "Hey, we love you. We want you to work for us. The internship to be a full-time job, but it's not going to start till January." Well, it's September. I got a car payment. I got, rent. I need to eat. I can't not work for 4 months.
Yeah.
So I moved back to Council Bluffs, Iowa, and I answered an ad in the Omaha World Herald, marketing and fundraising professional, or maybe I think it was a marketing, public relations and fundraising professional position. Okay, so I go to the address on the paper. Back in those days, you didn't Google it. Oh, the address. Okay, get out the
Get the
the city
Thomas
map,
Brothers map out. Yeah.
uh, and I showed up at the Boy Scout office. I'm like, oh, okay, this is odd. I didn't know that there was a professional side of scouting. And so I sat down, I interviewed, and they were telling me, here's what you do. Uh, you talk to people, you recruit kids, you got to raise money. I'm like, oh, that's kind of like sales in minor league baseball, and working in the stadium operations department on putting on camporees, and they're like, yeah, and you're not going to deal too much with kids. You're not a scoutmaster or a Cub Scout master or a den leader. You're handling the business side of scouting. Okay, that makes sense. And so I interviewed in Omaha, and Boy Scouts have a national personnel system. So
Hmm.
so I was in their system. Omaha didn't have a job. They didn't select me for a job, but I got a call from the scout executive in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. The scout executive would be the CEO of the local council or the local franchise. And I I talked to him. He's like, "Well, I've got a job for you. I need you to come up here and interview." And so, okay, I really don't want to drive 3 hours for an interview unless you're going to give me the job. And he said, "Well, I can't give you the job without interviewing you." I said, "Well, we've got a phone. Let's just interview here." And we bantered back and forth. And he's finally just said, "Well, you just drive up here and take the interview so I can give you the job."
Oh, there you go.
So so I drove up, and we talked, and he was telling me, he's like, "Now you're gonna work 50 to 60 hours a week." Okay, well, that's a lot less than I worked in baseball. So all right. He's like, "You're not gonna make very much money. I can only pay you $23,000." And I'm like, "Well, that's 10, 12 grand more than I made with the baseball team. So where do I sign?" And he's like, "Well, you're going to cover 11 counties in South Dakota, so there's a lot of driving time." Okay, well, I've driven all over Oklahoma, Missouri, Kansas, Iowa,
And I came
Nebraska.
and I came here, didn't I?
Yeah, I'm like, uh, okay, where do I sign? And so I actually had relatives in my I had an aunt and uncle, great aunt and uncle, that lived in Winter, South Dakota, which was going to be one of my communities that I would be in charge of. So, uh, you know, I'm like, this is like a no-brainer. I think the good Lord's looking out for me. Going from not having any job to getting a new job with a car and a raise and benefits, and so. Uh, and I ended up working out of my house. So I had an old desk that in fact, it wasn't even a desk. Before I got a desk, I had two sawhorses and an old piece of plywood that I used as my desk because I had remembered reading something that Sam Walton, that's how his desk started. I'm like, well, if it's good enough for Sam Walton, it'd work for me. And the price was right. Everything was free. Um, so I started working for the Boy Scouts and really, really enjoyed it. My first summer, I was in charge of a traveling Cub Scout day camp. So we traveled and put on kind of like a carnival event in all the communities in South Dakota and Minnesota. And I got paid to run around and shoot BB guns and bows and arrows, run around in shorts and a t-shirt, and Um, and I'm like, wow, this is pretty fun. And so it never really felt like a job. I found my two good things I was really strong at in scouting was I was good at running camps, making sure kids got signed up, camps were full, they had a good time, and that we turned a profit. And I was really good at raising money. And realized if you run camps for the Boy Scouts, it's kind of like being in minor league baseball. Your summers, you don't get a lot of time to do anything but work and be at camp. Um,
How
and
tough.
if you raise money, you're always going to have a job, and a lot of times your summers are off.
Yeah.
So, or you're spending your summers with donors playing golf, or going to a ball game, or and so uh, my skill set translated. Boy Scout councils needed somebody that could relate to donors, raise money, um, work with marketing and project management. And so my career track with the Boy Scouts took the fundraising track and the development track, um, and continued to sharpen that skill set, and ended up working for the Boy Scout Foundation in Dallas, traveling around the country working with Boy Scout councils and their donors to help figure out how to secure gifts of $100,000 to 5 million, and really understanding how to match a donor's passion with the local council's vision. To make sure that the donor wanted to give money to build a swimming pool, but the council needed a new dining hall. So let's not put a new swimming pool in. Let's figure out how to make a new dining hall work, or um, find out, does the donor really want to do a swimming pool, or they just thought it was a neat idea.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of how it worked. And again, they needed local council leadership here in Lincoln as a CEO, and um, the powers that be at the Boy Scouts thought I'd be a good candidate. So I came here to Lincoln to interview, and was selected to serve as the scout executive. Um, and like I said, did that for 4 years and enjoyed it. But when it got to the time that hey, it's time for you to look at a new job somewhere else, and we want you to start over somewhere else. I think the options they gave me were Pennsylvania and Montana, and I said, why, those sound great. You could have come 10 years ago. It would have been a lot easier for me to say yes.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, that's how the kind of the Boy Scout story started. And
You you equated or mentioned early on about the fact that what they were asking you to do with the Boy Scouts was really like sales and so on. Tell me what do you think the differences are, or really are there differences between sales and what people do in traditional kinds of selling of things and fundraising? And I'll tell you why I asked the question, because my belief is that they're really the same thing. Um, Obviously, there's a little bit more of a mission component to fundraising than sales, but really, are they all that different?
oh, that's a good question. In fact, one of my really good friends from my time living in Michigan, Matt Stevens, is a professional sales coach with Jerry Weinberg and Associates. He's a Sandler Systems guy, and disciple, and very talented and very good. There are a lot of similarities.
Mm-hmm.
I my viewpoint is that sales is more of a science. Fundraising is more of an art, um, but they do intertwine. The
Yeah.
the thing about really good sales people and representatives is both of them. It comes down to relationships.
Yeah.
Um, but with sales, the best ones are the ones that are disciplined. They know every day I'm going to make a certain amount of calls. I'm going to talk to a certain amount of people. I'm going to meet with a certain amount of people. And they've got that system in place where there's a follow-up. Okay, you need to follow back up this conversation. Um, and so sales, in sales, it's about finding the pain point, and getting at what the prospect really needs, and for them to tell you what they really need.
That's
And
of course the real issue, is that they need to tell you what they need. And I really find that there is a science and an art to sales, because I think the
yep,
best salespeople are really teachers, they're counselors.
yes,
And most people don't get that. And I think that's as true for people in the fundraising world. Um, yeah, there are some differences, but I think there are, as you said, a lot of similarities. And I think that all too often we miss that. And the best fundraisers and the best salespeople are people who really can dig down and understand, or learn to understand what drives their customer or their donor.
yes, I agree. And in fundraising, a lot of times in fundraising, I know early on it was very transactional. Hey, I've got this golf tournament. I'd like you to buy a foursome. Or, we're doing this fundraiser for this trinket or recognition piece. You know, as I grew up, and went to work for the foundation, I really learned more about listening. Finding out what the donor, asking them to tell their story. Tell me why you're involved in scouting. And
Yeah.
once they start telling that story, then you start picking up, bits and pieces. The other thing I think with fundraising is, if you can take two people and visit with the donor, you increase your odds of success, because you are going to hear something that the other person won't. Um, and you can actually better strategize. And then a colleague of mine that I worked with, at the foundation, he told me, he said, if you want somebody's opinion, you ask for their money. If you want somebody's money, you ask for their opinion. And it sunk in with me that, well, yeah, if you ask them what they think, and how they think something should work, or you show them the campaign brochure and, like, give me your thoughts on this, um, they'll lead you down the path.
Mm-hmm.
So similar to a salesman, and I know my friend Matt, he drives me crazy, because he's always asking he always asks me questions. Or, we go out to eat somewhere, or we meet somebody, and 20 questions later, Matt's still having a conversation with a guy, and I'm like, dude, let's go. But he's got that down. He asked, in fact, Sandler, I've got it here on my desk, that I think I got from him in one of his trainings I snuck in
Mm,
on, was the
the
100
Sandler
Sandler
methods.
questions that you
Yeah.
should, and so yeah, I think they're very much related. And I think, you know, um, I've learned, I'm I've brought the sales discipline to the fundraising, um, and then some of the, again, asking the questions, and not being so much in a rush. I think that's part of the challenges with fundraisers and nonprofits, is we are so into, I got to get this money. I got to get this sponsorship for this event. Or our year-end budget. We got to get these year-end gifts in, and we don't really stop and and take a donor to coffee and just say, hey, thank you, thanks for what you do for us.
Yeah.
Why do you do what you do for us? And once we start having those conversations, and we listen, and we don't listen and we're not sitting there thinking about what we're going to say next. That's where, the magic happens. That's
Yeah.
where the sale occurs. Um, you know, and sometimes I think, sales, you're selling a product, and we think that customer needs that product. Well, do we know, if we haven't asked the
That's the
customer,
issue. Right.
if they need it? And sometimes they don't even know they need it. And I sit on that end all the time. I get emails, hey, we can help you raise more money at this event. We can help you with a better CRM. And I'm like, no, no, no. you know,
Yeah.
um, and so, yeah, I think, again, like I said, I've learned a lot from some of my good friends that are salespeople and very successful. It's about the discipline. Put it in your calendar, you know, And uh, I've actually been on. I was a Salesforce disciple for a few years at the foundation, and that was, to me, that was just too rigid, because like, well,
Mm.
you met with Bill Smith 3 weeks ago. Proposal needs to be completed today and sent. Like, well, no, he's not ready.
Yeah.
And so it felt like I was always managing the tasks of the sales force, um, but understood why they were doing it, tickling it. Okay, it forced me to look. Okay, well, why isn't Bill ready? Oh, because I haven't found why, or I haven't. It's been 3 weeks since I've talked to him. So
Yeah, there are definite challenges. It is true that ultimately you've got to really have the opportunity to step back and look at what the customer wants or the donor wants, who is in a sense the customer. I know the Sandler system is often about pain. Well, what pain are you feeling as the person that we're trying to sell to, and can I figure out your pain? And that works sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't. But it isn't any different in fundraising. The difference is that you probably don't call it pain. You call it more an issue of what drives me to want to give to this organization or that organization, or what influenced me to even come there. And it amounts to the same thing, but we tend to um, still put things in such rigid terms that we ultimately don't get back down to what is the what does the customer or the donor, or in your case, the foundation really need, and then you map a strategy accordingly.
yeah, and it's really, again, goes back to, I think sometimes in the fundraising world, the nonprofit, we think we know why somebody comes. Oh, they support us because they come to our golf tournament. Okay, well, do you know why? You know, and a lot of times when you sit and ask, well, I came because, definitely on the foundation. Well, Dr. Green asked me to play in his foursome, or uh, Dr. Nate Green was my wife's oncologist,
Yeah, I
or
was just going to
Dr.
say,
Dr. Dunder's my neighbor. Those are the type of things, that, in my year and a half I've been here, I've been finding out. Um, you know, there's a ton of golf tournaments. Why do you come to our golf tournament? Well, my spouse was a patient, or the foundation helped my uncle, or and so it's finding that, and then the question that I think we don't ask enough in the nonprofit is, well, if we didn't do the golf tournament, would you still support the organization? Would you still support the mission? Because from my standpoint, I would love to have somebody just write me the sponsor check,
yeah,
and not have to worry about, paying for a golf foursome, or paying for, if you put on a gala and you gotta pay for the food, and you gotta pay for the venue. If we didn't have the gala, would you still write the check? And a lot of times I get it. The corporate money, it's easier to be tied to an event, because they they look at it as a marketing or a public thing. But I think, just again, having that conversation so that, well, they're coming. This is why they're coming to the golf tournament. This is why they're coming to the Mardi Gras Gala. Um, and again, uh, the challenge uh, with nonprofits is that a lot of us do a lot of non special events, and um, having having a lot of special events, you're not going to get the same sponsors back every year, because the date's not going to align, or the person who wrote the check for that company got promoted or left the company, and the new person isn't familiar with you. So um, I think, again, that's a question in the nonprofit world we need to ask, but a lot of times we're afraid of asking that. Would you write us the check without coming to all the events? Or if that's the why you're coming, or why you're writing the check is because of the event, that's also important to know, because then, they're not coming if we don't have this event. um and I would
and
I would guess that most supporters of your organization in the event, that's not why they're coming,
But they do love the personal contact.
yes, yes, and they love to see the stuff, the program in action, and they like the personal contact, and um, but yeah, the special events are very very time intensive to put on, um, and so yeah, it would be much easier if we could just have somebody, uh, give the gift because they support us and come back, you know, come back next time I can help. So
And maybe if they start out coming because of the events and so on, as given the way you operate, as you gain more of a personal relationship with them, you may find that you can guide some of them away from just needing to come to the event to support the organization. And it may be that you can get them to the point where they'll be a larger donor because you do the event, but also just because they buy into what you're doing and you're able to educate them about that.
yeah, absolutely. That's where the magic happens is after the event. How do you follow up? Is a thank you, a personal visit, finding out, hey, why were you there? And yeah, and we've had some success here at the foundation with that. We've got a couple donors that, yeah, they've come to one or two of our events, but yet they call us towards the end of the year every year, like, hey, what else can we help you with? And sometimes I don't even have to answer, like, we're sending you the check, use it how you need it. So,
There you go.
and I think a lot of the successful nonprofits around the country, that they do the exact same thing. It's just, uh, with most nonprofits, you're always trying to put 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound bag. And uh, you literally could work 24/7 and still be behind. And that's probably the same way in the corporate world. In fact, I'm sure it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a friend a long time ago. He said, "Yeah, faster planes and shorter runways," and that was back in 1993. So you could almost say it. We've got supersonic planes and no runways now. So just how fast things move.
The problem with all that, though, is that it's not the planes and the runways, it's the roads getting to the airport that tend to slow you down a lot.
Right.
I was reading an article a couple of weeks ago all about how more efficiently we have become and are with air travel and so on directly, but it's all the things leading up to it that take a lot longer than it used to, and it adds so much more stress in our lives, and that doesn't help either. But with what you're doing, anyone who understands nonprofits and understands the mission of an organization and buys into it knows full well the value and the joy in a lot of ways that you get from doing what you do and the joy of accomplishing a task. And that's probably a little bit different than what happens in a lot of sales environments. Although I would say for me, when I was selling computer products and I would spend a lot of time talking with prospects about what they want, what they need, and also making sure that my product was the one that would do what they need. And I had never had qualms about saying, our product's not going to work for you, and here's why. And that always eventually was a very positive thing because they would call me back at some point and say, because of everything you taught us, we've got another project and we know your product will do exactly what we want. So just tell us how much it is. We're not even going to put it out to bid. But that again is all in the relationship. And the
Correct.
joy of knowing that you helped someone really solve a problem is super. So it is true that it translates into sales, but you got to look for that opportunity and you got to look for that joy in your own life and what you do. And I think it is emphasized a lot less than looking at and understanding the mission of a nonprofit.
Absolutely. Good
Yeah,
analogy
which
there.
Yeah, which is part of the issue. So, what does success look like for you? You clearly are, I would say, successful in what you do and so on. You enjoy what you do. So, what is success to you?
Oh, that's an
Yeah, it
ever
is.
moving obstacle. I guess it just depends. I think from a professional standpoint at the foundation here, success is making sure we've got enough money to never have to say no to an applicant. Being able to grow the foundation, you know, live, capitalizing on the success of my predecessors, the board, the previous director Amy Green, and the previous donors that have set us up for success. Continuing that and making sure that 5 or 10 years down the road, we're given grants at $1,500 or 2,000, or we're paying everybody's mortgage for a year. Being able to, and that's kind of pie in the sky. But the success is that, hey, we're able to fund everybody. We are we're in we're covering every county in Nebraska. Right, our when somebody says the Heartland Cancer Foundation, they're like, "Yep, we know what they do. You need to support them. You need to get involved with them." I think success wise, personally, make sure that my wife and son uh, know that I don't spend more time at the office than I spend at home. But their understanding is that when I'm in the office, they understand why I'm is because there's a deadline for one of our special events, or that what I'm raising money for and engaging the community with is having an impact, uh, and changing the lives of cancer patients. But when success looks like when I'm at home, that I'm present. When I'm at CJ's baseball game or basketball game, I'm not on my phone, checking emails or texting people. If I'm on my phone, I'm taking a video or a picture of him. When we're at when we travel to one of my wife Lori's marathon trips, uh, I'm I'm not working on the laptop. The laptop doesn't even come with me. And my role is the support. Okay, get out on the course, cheer with her. Make sure she gets to the start line on time. Make sure she gets picked up on time, and I've got the change of clothes and the money to pay for the massage table if needed. That's my role. I think success on that end, uh, making sure that what I the effort I give at the office is the effort I give at home, and uh, sometimes that's not easy.
But
But
you do it, which is what is so cool, and you are very volitional about doing that. So, Lori's a runner.
Yep.
Huh?
She's a marathon runner, half marathon runner. Uh, I try to be as well. My mind can't stay focused for 26 miles. I can stay focused for 13 and be glad that I'm done with that part.
Yeah.
Um,
Does she work?
yeah, she's a seventh grade school teacher.
Oh, cool.
And so she's been a school teacher since I married her, and then she took some time off to run the household when our son was born. So she was the CEO of the Blum household for 9 years, and then she jumped back into the teaching world. Um,
Now it's a team effort.
yes, and so and yeah, and then success for me personally is making sure that I'm you know staying in relatively good shape and being healthy, and being proactive, uh, with my health, and I need to do a better job of watching what I eat. From a healthy standpoint, I love watching cake and cookies and sugar, desserts.
Yeah.
go into my mouth, but I like to make sure that I stay in shape through classes at the Y. Um, I teach a spinning class to help again help participants start their day off. It's a 5:30 Tuesday morning, so let's get the day off while most people are sleeping. Let's get the blood flowing. Set a um, good example for our other family members who are still home in bed. But get yourself off to a good start, and just try to keep the body movement. We're meant to move, and I spend a lot of time sitting at my desk, sitting in my car, sitting at tables talking to people. So I got to be up and moving, and just making sure that I'm healthy because I want to be able to play golf and want to be able to um, do
And
do
survive the
things as
snow.
I yep do things as I get older.
There you go. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received? I'm sure that you've had mentors and coaches and people that you've worked with, and a lot of people I'm sure have offered advice. What's the one that sticks out in your brain?
Um, one of my first bosses, he told me always trust your instincts. It seemed like every time I'd ask him a question that I was, or I had something I was dealing with, it's like trust your instincts. Uh,
Good
and
piece
so
of advice.
that's always there. And then a coworker of mine, when I was at the Boy Scout Foundation, he had a slogan: "Shut up and do stuff." And I just always thought that it's kind of his version of talk is cheap, you know. And so yeah, I think trust your instincts, and then um, the shut up and do stuff always makes me laugh, but it's just something that I just kind of remember. And
Makes sense. Well, where do you see the nonprofit world going in the next 5 or 10 years? I mean, we're seeing so many changes in so many things, and um, everybody is trying to grab a little piece of each of us and so on. Where do you see nonprofits going?
it's going to continue to be a challenge. I think the nonprofits um, need to refocus how we put together strategic plans. I mean, having a 3 to 5 year plan is just non-realistic anymore. Your strategic plan is probably 6 to 8 months, and then it's constantly evolving because the world is changing that quickly. I think nonprofits, those that are going to survive and be successful, need to operate more like a business. So many times in the nonprofit world, my experience is when times get tough, they cut back on marketing dollars. They let go of their development staff, which in the for-profit world, that would be like, well, why are if times are tough, you got to sell more. So you got to, your salesman got to make more sales. You make more product. You don't cut your sales force to in the for-profit world. So I think nonprofit wise, we've got to operate. We've got to change our mindset. Not only the staff getting out of the scarcity mentality, but also our boards, making sure that our boards understand it's okay to end the year with a surplus, because you can use that surplus to put it into an endowment. You can use that surplus to fund cash flow, to pay down debt. Uh, Having a surplus, you're a winning team. People want to be on a winning team. You don't want to recruit new board members and say, oh yeah, by the way, we got a debt of this amount, and we don't know how to get out of.
Yeah.
It's easier to recruit a board member. Hey, we had a significant surplus. We were blessed because we were good. We tightened our belt. We were aggressive in fundraising and relationship building, and we've got money in the bank. Our balance sheet's positive. So I think, again, in 5 years, the nonprofits that continue to be aggressive and strategic with relationship building and sharing their mission, and then operating like a business and not, oh, well, we don't want to spend money on this. Let's see if we can donate it, get it donated. Well, you're spending all your time and effort to try to get something donated that if you would have just spent the $500 to take care of, it had already been taken care of. But you've just spent your staff time and energy trying to get it donated, and a lot of times it ends up costing you more to get it donated than if you would have just wrote the check.
Yeah.
And I think, I do feel that several foundations are starting to understand that we've got to operate like a business. We don't, because years ago, foundations that you could never put in your proposal that this is going to fund a staff position. You had to call it, program delivery.
Yeah.
And, because nobody wanted to fund overhead. And if your overhead was over, 40% or whatever, you just weren't doing stuff effectively.
Right.
And we've got to change. We're changing the nonprofits that change their messaging to here's your impact. Yes, we might have 40% overhead, but we serve 30,000 people. Would you rather do that than have 10% overhead and serve 3,000 people? Which impact do you want to make? And the more people you serve, the greater impact that you have, chances are your overhead is going to be more. And so sharing that message, getting your board to understand that it's okay to budget a 5 or 6% raise for your staff. Well, the industry standard in our industry is 3. Well, 3% when you're making $150,000 or $200,000 sounds like a lot. 3% when you're making $50,000 or $60,000, that's not a whole lot. A 6 or 7% raise, is more impactful at that $50,000 or $60,000 level, and you'll keep good quality people. Again, the nonprofit sector is always going to be here. Again, I think the ones in 5 years, the ones that act like a business, that relate to donors, that take more of a relationship based for the fundraising part and educating the donors. Sometimes I think, oh, they give us a lot of money, but do we really tell them what we're about, and do we ask them to critique our annual report, or do we ask them to review the golf foursome assignments, just to say, hey, what do you think? And I've been guilty of this too, where they don't really need to know that. But sometimes it's just a courtesy, and maybe they see something. Hey, I wouldn't put these two guys together because they're competitors or whatnot. But do we ask donors and our board, their thoughts, and so I think, 5 years down the road, it'll be interesting. I like to joke. I hope I'm retired by then, but my son will be going into college then, so I think I'm going to still be working to fund his college adventure. But
is he in scouting?
he was in scouts. I was his den leader. He was one of the first lion cubs that we had here in Lincoln as lion cubs started, and we got through Arrow of Light, and then he went to a first couple of his troop meetings, and then other things, got to compete for his time. Music in school, and
It happens.
baseball and basketball. And our cub den went through those 2 COVID years, and so it was pretty rough. I would like to see. It's going to be interesting to see the effects that COVID has had on that group of kids that, for basically 3 years, actually here in Lincoln, 3 years were, so my son, 3rd grade year, half year was learning from home.
Yeah.
4th grade year was all mask. 5th grade year was, I think, all masks. So, but a lot of those extracurricular activities for those 3 years, we weren't meeting in churches. We weren't doing the social things. I'm curious to see how that affects them down the road. And there were a lot of organizations that COVID really struggled. The service clubs that had relied on those weekly meetings and that weekly human interaction. Those really struggled.
Yeah.
And so he still reminds me when we're doing stuff. He's like, "Oh, got to take this. Got to be prepared, Dad." I'm like, "It's an
There you
overnight
go.
trip, bud. We don't need 3 bags full of stuff." But okay, yep, you're right. We need to be prepared. So, um,
It's
so
fair.
yeah, we had a great time in Cub Scouts, and several of the kids in Cub Scouts are now all on the baseball team and the basketball team, and several of the parents. It's funny because a few of the parents that I was the den leader for their kid, they're now the coach. They're the baseball and basketball coach for my son. So
That's
it takes
fair.
a village.
It does. Well, if people want to support the Heartland Cancer Foundation and reach out to you, how do they do that?
It's again real simple. Go online, heartlandcancerfoundation.org, and click the donate button, or they can make a donation, cash, check. We can take Venmo. Uh, we can take stock gifts. You know, we uh, we can help anybody out who's willing to make an impact for cancer patients here in Nebraska. But yeah, our website, heartlandcancerfoundation.org, tells you all about us. If you want to come to our Mardi Gras Gala, February 17th, that's a good time. It's like being in New Orleans without having to go to New Orleans. We do a golf tournament in August here, so if you're a golfer and find yourself in Lincoln, Nebraska, we'd love to have you at Firethorn Country Club. Um, and
If they'd like to chat with you, how can they do that?
It's very, very easy. You can send me an email at chris@heartlandcancerfoundation.org, or you can reach out to me, cell phone number 972-835-5747. That's a Texas number. I
I
just
was
spent
just
4
going to
years
say.
learning that number. I wasn't going to relearn a new number when I moved to Lincoln here. So, I actually use that to my advantage because when it comes up, people think, "Oh, they're calling me about lapsed auto insurance or life
Yeah.
insurance." So I get to leave a voicemail, and they're like, "Oh, the Heartland Cancer Foundation." Okay.
Well,
So
Chris, I want to thank you for spending all this time with us. I value it and really appreciate you telling us all the things that you have and all the insights. It's been very educational for me and inspiring, and I hope it has been for everyone listening. I hope that you all enjoyed Chris's comments. We'd love to hear from you. Of course, as I always ask, I'd love a 5-star rating from you, if you would please, wherever you're listening to us. If you'd like to reach out to me, it's easy. It's Michael H.I., Michaelhi at accessibe.com, or go to our podcast page, www.michaelhinkson.com/podcast. And Michael Hinkson is spelled michaelhinkson.com/podcast. But again, love to get 5-star rating from you. We value that very highly. And any opinions and comments that you'd like to make, love to read them. And so, Chris, for you and any of you listening, if you know anyone else who ought to be a guest on Unstoppable Mindset, please let us know. We're always looking for people. And I have to ask, Chris, since you said this is your first podcast, how did it go for you?
well, I enjoyed it. I guess probably need to get the see how many 5-star ratings you get.
Yeah, we'll have to see how that goes.
But yeah, very very nice. It was good. Brought me with the headset and the microphone. It brought me back to my radio station days in college. And so
I know the feeling well.
yeah, well, I
Me,
guess
me too.
if you need another speaker down the road, I can come up with some other topics to talk about, I guess.
Well, if
But
you want to, you're welcome to do that. If you want to shoot some more questions and all that, let's do it again. Always,
we
I'm always ready.
Yeah, happy to do it. But let's see how many of your star ratings you get. If you get like half a star for this one, then you're probably like, yeah, we're gonna lose Chris's email.
Nah, never happened. Well, thanks once again for being here and for all your time.
All right. Thank you very much, Michael.